So, yeah, it feels so good to be back in IIT KGP again because my my connect with IIT KGP goes to my architecture days. I'm not from IIT KGP, but it was a enemy college for us in zonal NASA's in the zone 4. So I come from architecture school in Cuttack, and we had a lot of events of NASA's and ZUNASA's where we met together, a lot of events and a lot of things happened. And my lot of mentors do come from IIT Kharagpur, so I felt very blessed when I came over here again to see the land. Now, the subject which was given to me is more about applications, more about the way forward. I deliberated a lot that what should I do? Should I make a PowerPoint presentation? Should I put in the jargons and the technical stuff into how we do the things in the practical life in the field of architecture? But then I thought that it's good to make it interactive. It's good to make it a way that we can induce more and more people first to get more into architecture, not professionally even, then at least into the field so that they can do something good into the field somewhere or other. At the same time, I also wanted to bring a case that architecture and history is very much synonymous in my eyes. And both requires a skill of storytelling. Architecture needs extensive storytelling. And when I go back to the past, like how the people conceived architecture back then, and the way all the analogies were written into the text, they're all in a very story form. Now, we have got 5 or 6 keywords here. It's Indian architecture, if I use the word for Vastukala or Vastu Shastra, and way forward, and applications. So I wanted to make it quite interactive. So if one could just tell me to start with what does it mean to be Indian, because these words are very important. I thought that I will digress into each and every word, or maybe that I will end the session that way: Indian architecture, application, and way forward. So what do we mean to be Indian to start with? Any thoughts, any ideas? What hits your mind? Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Tolerant. Okay. Okay. Diversity. Okay. Diversity, tolerant, culture of the past. You okay. What else? Anything else? Uh, Pardon me? Okay. 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 Yeah, please. Yeah. Okay. 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 Yeah, okay. So when it comes to the word Indian itself, there's a lot of synonyms to it, a lot of words used for it. But there's a thing in it that the moment I call an Indian product, it may not be universal. It may not be universal, but the moment I call Indian methodology, it will become universal. So, despite being Indian, the two things, the product and the methodology, both cater to a very different, broadly different ideas altogether. Now, when I say that Indian methodology can be universal, any guess why I am saying it? And I am saying that product cannot be universal or may not be universal. In some cases, maybe, but necessarily it may not be universal. But methodology is always universal. Any word on it that why it can be universal? Yeah. Okay. Partly on the line, which, yeah. Pretty much on the line, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, please. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, if I accumulate all the answers together and then I superimpose my ideas on it, what I have really felt about it, being Indian methodology, you will have to find about the Indian methodology, we need to really go where India was. Because what purely India was in the initial days. So it goes back to the ideas of the Vedas to start with. And when you see one of the common word which occurs so many times in the Rig Veda, it's Reet. R, below you have got dot, when you write in English, T and A, Reet. What does this Reet means? Reet is represented as a cosmic order, or the order of the, how the cosmic order, the geography, or the whole universe needs to work. So, when say you are in Kashmir, you will follow a particular way to live there. That clothing what you will wear will be adhering to that principle. When you are in the northeastern belt, say in the Manipur, your clothing will vary. The way you build the house will vary. When you are down in the south, say towards the Kanyakumari, again the climate will change, again the geography will change, the topography will change. Houses you build, the dress you wear, the food you eat, everything will start changing. There is no uniformity. But you are unified by a set, and these are subsets. What is that set? Set is Reet. To respect the Reet is called the dharma, that is to hold, or that's how the texts have defined it. So even when you are in, say, Moscow in the freezing temperature, you will not say that I'm going to wear a dhoti, but you will wear something which is going to suffice the climate over there. So that's the very Indian way to look at it, that you always respect the Reet, you always respect the geography, what is there. So precisely my idea of looking into the unity in the diversity comes from this fact that we all are unified by a factor, that is dharma, which is to respect the Reet. But at the same time, diversity is bound to happen because there are different geographies, there are different geologies, there are different climates. So you have to respond according to it. And when you do it, it becomes very much Indian methodology per se. So even if I am trying to create a product, say, sitting in the Western world of the globe, then also when I apply the Indian methodology of respecting the Reet, I will not impose my idea of product over there, but I will take care of the climate over there, and I will create a product in such a way that it sustains in that place per se. Now, when it comes to the product, I may have created a product over here, say, but the house, kind of house which I have built in central belt of India may not be at all be feasible in Northern America. Same, but if I am very much unified by my ideas, if I am very much unified by my principles and the theories that this is the way this needs to be. So I'll carry forward that idea and it will be replicated everywhere. So once you start looking into the Marxist buildings per se for a certain period of time, in the eras of the 1940s, especially after the culture, after the era of the Gramsci and after the cultural Marxism came up, you see buildings are getting very much unified. They are being built for the purpose. Buildings have become more like a machines. They have become like a machines to live in. There is no such thing called the diversity living within them, because how many of you have read the book Fountainhead? Watched the film? So, yeah. So there is one very integral dialogue was there in last phase where Howard Rock says that every building has its own integrity. So what that integrity means, that integrity is all about how especially that context and everything and how that building needs to perform, and every building has its own identity at its own. Now, going back to again a quote by a Westerner whom many hate in India, like Winston Churchill, but he said a very pertinent point. That point was that first we shape our buildings and then those buildings shape us. So the way we build our society today, in terms of the building, in terms of the architecture, tomorrow they are going to have a lot of effect on us. So it becomes very pertinent that we keep on respecting the wreath. That is the cosmic law, which is bound to be respected in particular reason, and then we react to it. So that precisely becomes the Indian way or the Indian methodology to approach any design problem or anything per se. Now, what is an architecture? Because it was Indian architecture, we define that what it means to be Indian. So what is architecture for us? Any pointers? What is architecture? It's a very common word. You have got software architect, you have got many kind of, we are the real architects though. Yeah. What else? Yeah. Yeah. Any more answers? Let's forget construction. We don't just construct, we ideate a lot. No, that is, you are doing a deed there, but you are not architecturing. What is architecture? See, this word is used with everything. You can become any architect. You use a profession and add a word architect to it, okay? It's very synonymous. But again, who is a builder? Who is a creator? What essentially like, yeah? Sir, can we say a person who gives birth to material objects, he designs that. He gives birth to a living structures. Okay. Have you heard a name called Zaha Hadid? Zaha Hadid. So she was a mathematician and architect. She did some fantabulous buildings, but many of her buildings was never built. So it was more of just a concept. So it can just be in your brain too at some point of time. It may not be executed for multiple reasons. So if I have to break down an idea for architecture, everything to do with the creation is architecture, in my own personal opinion. So architecture, like a point was put that a need arises and we react to it and we give a solution, right? That's where, because you will never do any kind of architecture, any kind of creation unless you see some kind of need. Some kind of need needs to be there. But we create a lot of thoughts. Those thoughts are then translated into certain ideas, and those ideas then take a form of a theory. Then they may take a form of maybe you will start sketching it out and thereon. But where those ideas are coming from, that's very pertinent to understand. Like say for example, I just say that I know that all of us have not gone to Mars, right? But if I just say that, imagine your 5 minutes on Mars. Can't all of you imagine something? Being on Mars for 5 minutes, what you will think? Maybe that everyone will have a very different idea about the Mars, but you are still able to think about it, right? So what was it that made you think about the space which you have never been to? You have just heard of it. It's just a hearsay, but you just thought about it. What was it? What is creativity? What is dream? So there's a very the atheistic school of the science which says that when you dream, they have got a formula for the dream as well, that this is how you are dreaming. But that also fails at a certain point. Like for example, when Stephen Hawking was talking in his famous book on the I forgot the name of the book, Brief History of Time. In that, he just is unable to explain the Big Bang. He is unable to go beyond that. He says it's a godly phenomenon, though he's an atheist. Now, where are you dreaming from? What it is coming from? How do you define it? Don't tell it God, okay? Because that will not suffice in an academic discourse. What is that? What that word should be? Yeah? But past experiences, you never went to Mars, right? But you thought about it. Maybe that you have not heard of Mars at all. Imagine. You are just told it's a planet. Forget, it's not told that you are not a planet. It's not even a planet. You have just said that Mars is something, you just say that you are on Mars. You will not react? You will react, right? You will just start thinking. Right? For example, to enter into architecture stream in India, you go through an examination called NATA, National Aptitude Test of Architecture. After having in my time, it used to be AIEEE. Now they have combined it all. So I don't know how it's working nowadays, but after the examination, you used to appear for NATA. In the NATA, you have got the questions like that. Imagine that you are an insect inside a lady's purse and you are looking at. So you are not an insect, you are not looking at, but still you imagine, right? You created to gain those 30 damn marks there. But so how is it working? What's making you think on that line? What is it? Yeah. Yeah. So it's consciousness, right? What is that consciousness? Has it anything to do with the mind, or it is somewhere else? Yeah, okay. What else? What is consciousness? It's not symptom. Maybe if we, huh? Of course it is, because there's a concept in our tradition, right? We have got Reet, we have got Dharma, and then we have got a thing called Maya. Must have heard the term Maya. So when you get detached from Maya, Maya gets away, then sanskar collapses for you. The world is irrelevant for you. So that's why Maya will always be there. So it goes into the Vedantic philosophy. Certainly I'm not expert of it and don't want to get into it right now. But what it says that the world is a dream. World is a dream, and that matter which is existing there perhaps can never be defined. Which there are a lot of scientists who are saying that we will be able to define the consciousness, but still that consciousness has not been attempted to be defined in a very profound way, and perhaps it will never be defined the way it is. But that consciousness is something which is driving everything what you are imagining, right? Now, once you start imagining, you start doing the architecture. So it's a consciousness which becomes a very crucial factor. So despite the fact that maybe that if I make you all listen a common song or a common music and say that take this exercise happens in many architecture studios as well, that for in 30 minutes you just draw something, right? What you think by listening to that music, right? So when you do that, I have given you the same feed of data. Had it been so materialistic, had it been so, as people want to project it as this quantum of thing has been fed to you, this was because the sound can also be defined in certain ways, right? That music, whole music can be defined, it has been given to you, but still all of you react in a very different way to it. It's, of course, one is because of the lived experiences. Second experience is what is not lived at all, which is existing somewhere in the sublime. You are not at all aware of it. So that is why many times you see something in a dream which you have never thought of as well. So when those ideas really get into it, then we get the architecture like Kailasha temple. So have you heard of a thing called, must have heard about Kailasha temple. It's in the precinct of Ellora. So so it is one of the very anomalies in the whole Indian architecture, because in Indian architecture, we never build for the excesses. That there's a lot of complaint of a lot of people, oh, Indian architects were not so great because they didn't build so huge and all. But the whole concept was that habitable spaces never went to beyond a certain height. There was a reason for it. I am giving you a story over here. So there was a person named Abdul Razak. Abdul Razak was an ambassador of Shah Rukh, who was the son of Taimur. He had come to Vijayanagar Empire, and just to see that how because empire was very prosperous, it was one of the wealthiest in the world, and many people might not know, but by 1000 AD, as per Angus Madison's calculation, our GDP per share of the world was around 32.2%. Yeah. So by 1500 it became 24 point some percent, and then started declining. But it's projected that around the era of 180, it was almost 1/3 of the whole of the world. But yeah, Vijayanagar Empire was very wealthy, and the man Abdul Razak came over here, and he was just flabbergasted looking at the lifestyle of the king, despite the fact that he was not living the so ginormous lifestyle as we would look like it has to be so huge and all. So basically, for Abdul Razak, even the modesty of the king over here was looking like it's so overwhelming, because nothing was available. They always lacked in the resources. They never had a lot of money. So the largest of the structure in whole of those area is the mausoleum of Taimur himself, which is not even close to the height of Taj Mahal. That's the largest structure in that region. So they always lacked into the resources. So that's why Babur writes in one phase in Baburnama that he says that around 200 people were put to construct this mausoleum of Taimur, but he was able to deploy around 2000 people plus some 300 in India to build a place in Agra. So he got a lot of people, and he says that even to build the structure of Taimur, around 50 or 60 people were brought in from India. So the labor was enough, labor was in abundant, resources were there. So the skills were there, skill set was there in India. So coming back to this guy, Abdul Razak, and Shah Rukh happens to be in the lineage of Babur itself. So Babur comes from the lineage of the Taimur. It's a whole, that's how the lineage works. Taimur ke baad Shah Rukh, and so on, and then in the line comes Babur. Now, they were flabbergasted looking at the last structure, the king Raya II lived over there. So that structure, he says that it is even larger than the largest of the bazaar in the Herat. So even the largest the market in the Herat was not to the size of the palace in which the king was living, though the fact is that that palace was not even that ginormous in scale. So we were building not in excesses, but we were certainly building something to a great magnificence in that period. Now, coming back to the case of Kailasha temple. Kailasha temple, how many of you have been to that structure? What could you feel there in the Kailasha temple? When I went there, I was just startled because all I did in whole my life was to draw the sketch of Kailasha temple for 10 marks in the history of architecture. That's all what I did. But when I went there, the experience was I just can't explain what it was. I felt like so small. I just felt that everything what has been taught is just so plain. We were never taken into detail of the structure and why it was built. And still, though it remains a mystery that how Kailasha temple was built. Though there are theories, but those theories, if you back calculate, can't give you that structure. That still remains a mystery. Now, this was a place where the whole transformation of my journey, I consider myself as an ex-Marxist. So I was deeply influenced by the communist ideas. So when I went to the Ajanta caves, close by is the Ajanta cave complex. So how many of you have been to Ajanta caves? Okay. Anything different what you found there? Have you been to other cave architecture apart from Ajanta? What was different in that? It's very unique in Ajanta caves. It's not there anywhere else. No, not paintings. Paintings is crucial, it's a key, but that's not a unique feature. There are caves with the paintings elsewhere too. But there's a unique feature in the Ajanta caves that happened to become, that transformed me completely. No, not, so those are very socio-political, forget everything, the people don't exist, just look at the cave. What is that unique thing in that? I'll tell you. So, how many of you understand that what is a section in a building? So basically, if I cut an object from somewhere and look at it, it becomes a section. If I cut that over here, and then I look into it, it's a sectional drawing. So when you cut a cave of Ajanta, you see a very unusual phenomenon. In the cave, you enter and you step down, 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 and it's a bowl kind of shape completely. It's unusual than any other cave architecture. So I got curious to understand that why it is so, because I was very interested in the cave architecture back then. It was a study trip, and then I asked the guide, but he couldn't answer. And then I got back to there was one professor named Professor Deshpande, a local professor in Aurangabad, and then he explained the whole phenomenon. And what he explained, he said that this is the place where they used to store water. Okay, the water was used to be stored by the monks, and then because the source of color that time was the organic colors, and when you're using the organic colors, and there is no light within the cave, right? You need the light. The only source of light back then was not Thomas Alva Edison's thing, but it was the fire, right? And when you use fire in front of the organic colors, they will just fade off, right? The carbon will just make it not work. So they had to use an alternative. So what these guys did, that now it may not look so magnificent to you, but it was magnificent for me. They stored water in that, and it faces kind of south. South is where the high sun comes, and the rays used to come here, hit the place, and the whole light used to happen, and that's the way they painted the whole structure inside the cave. And I was just startled that whom I thought to be the most stupid of the folk, like the most superstitious one, were doing such magnificent scientific works. The so-called Snell's law was being used back then. Snell's law of reflection, right? So, and then, so again, coming back to Kailasha temple, this is again a very magnificent piece of architecture which can happen only if you are so surrealistic in your thought, or maybe some consciousness has just made it happen. Now, architecture, we all understand that it is about catering to the needs of the people. A society has certain needs, right? Then maybe that when you make a chapati or roti or something, that is also architecture. You are creating something, but that also was because certain need. You thought to create something. Likewise, chair was created because people thought that perhaps this is the best sitting posture, so we need to have chairs, right? That's how the wheel was invented, and so on and on. And then if you would read the journey of the houses, that how people used to live, I am just picking the conventional idea of how the evolution happened right now, but there are many challenges to it too. But So in that, people used to first live in the cave and then they progressed to the huts and so on and on, right? But they realized that there's a need to do something to protect themselves. That's why the houses began to appear. And when the houses appear, then you first don't look into the aspect that whether it needs to be culturally significant or not, because culture is made by the people. At first, there must not have been the culture, but culture is always built by the people. The first thought was always to house them, give them the shelter. And once you give them the shelter, then you start deliberating into the other thoughts too. Now, coming back to the Vedic time, or rather than Vedic time, we are complete all through Vedic in reality. Now, Aryan invasion theory is all bunkum. So the people or the rishis, what they used to do, they used to observe the stars, the constellations, and everything. And they observed one thing, that everything is very cyclic. Everything is cyclic. Moon comes in a cycle. The stars, the movement, he sees the movement, they see the movement of the star because the movement of the earth. This is again cyclic. So they came to a conclusion that everything is very cyclic in nature. So their observation of the whole sky started making them develop a lot of geometries, and a lot of sutras were written, right? Where the whole sutras created that how do you create the pit for the havan to happen, the yagna, and there's a whole calculation. That's where the whole Pythagoras theorem also goes back to those days, that why they did the way they did. So when those geometries started developing, they figured out a lot of divine proportions, divine ratios. And by the way, how many of you have heard of golden ratio? Golden ratio? That's the chalawa of I don't get into it. But that's precisely what the theory says, that if you fit in everything in golden ratio, everything will start looking, that's why it's called golden. But again, forget the human beings. I'm saying that just look at these stuff. Okay. So what is this golden ratio? Yes, it is that ratio, but what is it? Okay. Okay. So what you called it? What is the name of it? Okay. How many of you have read the book of Fibonacci? I have. So whom does he credit for the series? You call it Fibonacci, he called him something else. What to do? He is attributing, tell me. No, he didn't do that. You need the introductory chapter of it. There you will find he is attributing it to some unknown rishi, unknown sage of India. This is what Fibonacci is saying, but we call it Fibonacci series. And in some texts, it appears at Hemchand Fibonacci series too, but it's not the Hemchand. There was how many of you, I'm sure that many would be practicing Indian classical music, right? Must have heard the term called Chand. What is Chand? Okay. So who is considered to be the father of this whole Chanda Shastra? Not Natta Shastra, Chanda Shastra, Pingala. Pingala is the man who gave the whole idea that how this ratio works. So, and this is happening around 4th century BC. So he has devised this idea, and that was the period when all the sutras, all the texts were being codified into Sanskrit poems. Because Sanskrit is a poem which can be arranged, Sanskrit is a language in which you can arrange these things in a very beautiful manner. It's very rhythmic. The meters really help it. And that is why a lot of mathematical formulas were also embedded in that certain way. So our whole progression as a civilization was happening with the mathematics. A lot of mathematical discoveries happened. A lot of things happened, which today, like for example, for calculus, we attribute it completely to the Newton and I forgot the other guy's name, but yeah, Leibniz. But it certainly the foundation was, of course, the basic foundation goes back to the period of Aryabhatta and all basic, but necessarily it was done by the Kerala School of Mathematics, Madhavacharya. It's in 14th century. So where the whole principle was laid. So our whole civilizational quest, right from observing the stars, right, still in the house when the puja samskar happens, we do create those geometric patterns, the stars, nakshatra, tithi, everything we remember. And back then the Brahmins were the people who were just had this calculation on their fingertips, like the Brahmagupta, Brahmira, and there were a lot of such people who did a fantastic job in terms of proportion, ratios, and set across the all sutras, which began to be used into the construction of building. Eventually, we don't have a lot of text with us which talk about the details of how those sutras have been adopted to create the proportion exactly. We don't have them because a lot of texts have been lost to a lot of causes. But certainly because of mathematics existing here this way, mathematics happens to be the foundation or the core to understand the proportions. And our mathematics is much more different than how the Western world looked at it. Like for example, how many of you have heard the name of Dr. C.K. Raju? So basically Dr. C.K. Raju has challenged a lot of theories of Albert Einstein as well. So he's the man behind India's first supercomputer Param. And he's written many such books where he debunks the whole ideas that the mass to India was brought across by the Western world. He has a complete thesis around it, multiple books. So he talks about, he has explained these things very well, and when in the whole Western world, you read the axioms to prove 2 plus 2 equal to 4, the Peano's axiom, but you know that 2 plus 2 equal to 4, you not waste time to really do a theory. This is whole logic. So Indian mathematics or the Ganit was all about getting into the practical aspect of it, the commercial angle, building architecture, direct geometries. There was no much complexity into going into prove something unnecessarily. So whole idea was very practical in nature. So that happens to be the basic root where the different kind of proportions, different kind of geometric forms started happening. Now, when we look into the Vastu Purush Mandala, I am sure that in the morning session or something you must have come across with the Vastu Purush Mandala. So, what is it? It is a form of fractal, isn't it? What is fractal, by the way? Okay. Any live example from around you from any modern buildings? Yeah. You will just find them. You will find in Bangalore also what people do. I am an architect, I can tell you. Pattern is taken, replicated, we copy it to the 3D mathematical logic, we make it work. But the real example, if you want to see, it happens in, you go to Hampi. The shikharas of all the temples are in the fractals. Geometry, the same geometry repeats, and you can just get the feel of how the fractals were used. How could people use those fractals back then when if they didn't knew how to really devise those equations? It is impossible to really work with it, right? How will you keep on calculating that how much you need to cut the material and what is the length and all? Because it's not just, and it all, there's a lot of rock cut architecture. There's a lot of brick, the shikhas are made of brick as well. But again, to get the whole dimensions that this is how the proportion needs to, how will you do it if you don't know the mathematics of it? It just can't happen, right? So certainly there was a lot of logic to it. So when there's a person named Greg Lynn, I have a lot of respect for him because I learned a lot about the mathematical aspects of architecture from him. He is a mathematician and architect, and he brought in the term called blobbytecture. Blobbytecture is an idea where can we produce a building by the 3D machine. So anything which can be laid to an equations, that form can be generated and that can produce to a 3D printing machine and the building can be built that way. But while he was dealing with fractals, before that fractals had been explored in very close by region where I live in Vijayanagar in Hampi. And there are many other temples. So, and when you look back to the whole Indian cosmology, that how it works, it's like a fractal. Like a fruit comes from a chit, CIT, whatever term we may like, and that fruit is onto a branch. There are multiple branch onto the tree, right? Multiple, those trees are into the forest. Those forests are into the territories. Those territories are into the country. Countries are into the globe, right? And multiple globes are there, the planets are there in the whole universe. And then you start from the Shunya, you end in the Shunya. It's very interesting, isn't it? But we were looking into the fractal. Necessarily, I'm not getting into the Vedantic aspect of it, but I'm trying to get into the aspect of how mathematically advanced we were. And those mathematical advancement was certainly helping us to get into this interesting architectural forms, right? Which looks like it doesn't look like enigma, because we see so many fancy buildings built nowadays just by a click of a scripting. You can do just anything, any miracles, right? But those resources were not there back then. They were doing, so that's why it remains an enigma to me as an architect or a serious student of history. I will not call myself a serious student of history because I don't have a degree, but yes, I'm a student of history and architecture. So it appears to be an enigma to me. So yeah, Indian architecture was certainly way advanced, not because as people say that we didn't build so many gigantic structure, because we all always believed in the concept called appropriate technology. Still in architecture, we need to strive for the appropriate technology. Don't do the excesses. Like, of course, because I deal with the commercial sector, so builders never let you do the excesses. That's for true. But still, you are not supposed to, Indian philosophy of looking into the building was always that, habitable space should be this much. Now, can you imagine that why they restricted that habitable spaces shouldn't go beyond certain height even if he is a king? What could be the reason? And this reason was very well explained by Christopher Alexander, a person who wrote a book called The Pattern Language. It's a great book. It should be read by non-architects too. So he has given the reasons for it. So he's not referring to the Indian part, but that reason very well applies to it. Why he says that you shouldn't go beyond certain height. Habitable height should be limited. Even if the shikhars are there, it's not habitable, right? Those are not habitable, but still, where the human being reaches, it should be to a certain height. Why we limited it? Many mock it that Indians couldn't build that large habitable spaces, but yeah, that's the reality. But what was it? Why we didn't do it? And psychology is a right word, but not that. The reason what you mentioned is correct, actually. What could be the reason? Okay, how many of you live in apartments, high-rise apartments? High-rise means anything beyond 3 floors. Okay, so how many times you get downstairs? कितने बार आप नीचे जाते हो? How many times you go downstairs? Rarely we go, right? I live in 16th floor and it's ridiculous. But so the whole logic was that human being is part of the ecosystem. And the moment you start living above the tree, the first thing what you do is that you start disrespecting the tree. You have gone taller than tree. You have gone taller than the trees, right? So that's why, these are the small things which comes in the childhood, that elder is sitting, you just sit down, right? It used to be said in the past, but it's not practiced anymore. But going back where it is coming from. So once you go beyond the trees, first thing is that, yes, disrespect is a metaphorical term, because all these emotions are metaphorical term to explain a lot of things. What we are doing is that you are not getting the chirping of the birds the way it is supposed to come to you. There used to be a time when the chirping of the bird used to wake you up. It's no more the case. Of course, one reason being that, of course, there are not many trees, but one more reason is that you are living way beyond where the chirping of the birds could come, right? And the sound travels in a particular way. It doesn't travel this way, right? Then you have cut yourself off from the feel of being below the tree. The feel of being below the tree is somewhat very different. Once you walk to the orchard, you will see the difference. You will feel the difference. It's just something which can't be matched with any artificial garden what you build. So what we do, we create small kind of landscape, terrace and all. We say that we have created all those kind of fancy stuff. But will it ever suffice the need what a human being was needed to be? No, it will not, because we are breaking the wreath. We broke the wreath. We broke the deal with the nature. So nature will not take care of you anymore. And there have been a lot of, when Christopher Alexander was dealing with this subject of high rise, that once you live beyond a certain height, that time a lot of high rise had not even happened in USA when he was writing this book. But still there were tall buildings. So he was explaining that it starts affecting you psychologically. So if a person is not going to work and is always back in house, so the person will just see the 4 into multiple walls, multiple rooms, what you want to say. Those will be only seeing what you are seeing, because in the packed up life of the current time, you don't have even time to meet across with the people around, right? You are completely disconnected with the nature. So what you have done to yourself, you have brought yourself to a cell, a jail. You are literally created a jail for yourself, which will start affecting you psychologically, and it will affect your consciousness. Consciousness is a lived experience. Now, we all build something, we all do certain kind of architecture, whether you are working in IT sector, whether you are working in a mechanical engineering sector, whichever sector, you are performing some kind of creation. And all the creations are the output of the consciousness. So if your consciousness will not be at the right order, the products which you will create will certainly not be a healthy thing for any civilization which is existing or is to come in the days to come by. Now, it really becomes very interesting that these are the problems, these are the challenges, and we do understand that, yes, the traditional way of looking at architecture was much more different than how we envisage it today, because of the population load, right? One can come up with a point that population load is so high, we need to go high, right? We need to go taller, the building needs to go up. Like the places where we are using a FSI of around 5 to 6. FSI is floor space index, or FAR, floor area ratio. It means the site is an X area, X acres or X square meter. When it is 5, it means you can build 5 into X square meter. So when you look at the bylaws of, say, 10 years back, it will talk about 2 FSI. Before that, it will talk about 1 FSI. So I hear the stories from I used to hear stories from the college professors. There used to be a period when if you could get FSI beyond 1 somewhere, it's like that, wow, we have got what it is, it's miracle. But we are dealing in Bangalore itself, we are dealing with FSI of around 5 to 6 with the, basically you can transfer FSI from a certain place to other place. So those are the provisions which have come in. So we have started going up and up. But at the same time, it is really backfiring. It is backfiring the whole psychological aspect of the human being. Health issues are coming. We are not really living as a human being as architecture should have let us have lived to be. And going back to the verse of Winston Churchill, that first we shape our buildings and then they shape us. They are shaping us in a very negative directions. Now, so what should be the way forward, and where do we stand? Because these are the challenges. You are supposed to build, you are supposed to cater to the population, you are supposed to cater to the need of the offices which are required. You have to build that much. So what is the least we can do? One is that now, if I say that we need to look back to the Vastu Shastra, so does it necessarily mean that I am suggesting to go to the Vastu Purush Mandala? In Vastu Shastra, we have got a Vastu Purush Mandala, that in different regions, it's assigned that, in the Agni Kone, you can, in terms of residential, you can have kitchen, right? In the southwest region, you will have a master bedroom. But it's a very interesting case. Have you ever thought that why a kitchen was supposed to be in the southeast and why master bedroom in southwest? Any logic? Because it's not written white, so you can put a logic. No one will say that's wrong. No, it's different at different places. It's very logical. And No, it varies from places to places, sir. That's the problem. So necessarily it is, see, in India, whatever principles we set, it was based on sun. Sun was the primary thing. And it was considered that southeast is a place where the sun rays will always be there, and the kitchen was not so sophisticated as we have right now, right? So it used to kill all the germs, the moisture will just go off, and the morning light was very important because that's when the cooking is happening, that's when the water is being spilled. So the heat of the east was very much necessary. And the southwest was very integral because southwest was one of the most warmest region, because sun is the highest in the south and the lowest in the west. But the temperature is also high in the south and also in the west, in the hemisphere where we live in. Now, when that region is very much heated up, it needs to be occupied by people who don't live there. So generally the masters are the one who are not gonna be living there. Because of that back then, the male would go to the work and female will not be staying there but be looking after the household, like how they looked at the things in that period. So it was never occupied. So that's the reason why southwest was given to the masters. It was never assigned to be used by someone else. And that was the logic for having the thing in the southeast, kitchen in the southeast. So coming back to whether we are we supposed to go back to the Vastu Shastra for doing will it solve the problem? Yeah, to some extent. But how do we deal with it in offices? There was no offices back then. So, yeah. Yeah. But, yeah. 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 So basically, what happens that office buildings are very much governed by one idea that the tenant or the person who is going to occupy it, he just wants a lot of carpet area so that he can put lot employees into the place. So they are just, let's cramp. So if National Building Code will say that, 10 per 10 meter square you have to put one person, Accenture will come and say, hey, we want to put one person 7 square meter. So the whole idea is to cramp in more and more people. So I'm talking about the challenges what we are seeing into the time of now. Now, Vastu plays a very crucial role in terms of really taking care of it in terms of climatology. So what it has done, it has given us the path of that basic thumb rule. Thumb rule is a rule which is not for the professional, that aisa hota hai to aisa hota hai. That's why it's called thumbs rule. You don't need to be literate in that field, that's why it's thumbs rule. The thumb rule is very clear, that sun is there in the east, high in the south, sets in the west, and so the west sun, the sun of the west, when it's down, right, it will always be giving you glare. Glare is something which directly comes into your eyes. You just can't control it. You can't stop it. South sun is what you can stop, right? Because using the chhajjas, because it's high. But when the sun is coming directly from here, what you will do? You can't, right? Because in the office building, we'll have the glazing, the glass. So the ideas which needs to be adopted is that we need to start relooking into the orientation of the buildings, which is very necessary. That how do we orient our building? How do we orient our buildings in such a way that it gets maximum of the diffuse light? And we make the office building right now. If you go to the places where the office buildings exist in the masses, the IT parks, you see a very thick floor plates, like they are ginormous. So if the light will certainly not come in the central areas, because light also travels at a certain distance. Here again, the thumb rule for the arrival of the light is it travels twice the length, twice the height of the window. So if the height is set 10 feet for the window, so light will reach only 20 feet. 20 feet this side, 20 feet that side. So 40 feet is your span, and whatever in the between is a dark space. The dark spaces are the spaces which are gonna make life again very unhealthy. I sit in my office in a place where no natural light comes. It's all these kind of lights. So what does it starts affecting, it is certainly affecting me, though I am not aware, but it has an impact for me, because as a human being, I was supposed to live with the direct sun rays, I was supposed to live with the nature, but that's not the case anymore. So we as a, because if everyone is not going to pursue the profession as an architect, but certainly someone will become the client, someone. So it it also needs to be controlled by the client, the user, that you you need to come across with the idea to the architect that let's not do it, let's not. I understand that maybe that I will lose a bit of say some crores of rupees here and that, but the largest where the healthy being is concerned, the health capital, which is very crucial, for us, because if the civilization will not be healthy, then there's no point of having all those offices. Perhaps because there are places where the age of the people is reducing day by day, and there are places where sickness is increasing. There are a lot of geographies in the world. Now, again, coming back to the approaches, there is a thing what we always use in architecture is passive techniques. Passive techniques, how many of you are from the northern part of India? Anyone else? Northern part of India. Northern part. So there's a very common thing there, khas. You remember? Khas. So there what we do, you use a khas and put water into it, and this just works with the principle of the coolers. And coolers also, we used to have those khas. So these are the passive, this is one of the passive techniques by which we reduce the temperature of a place by keeping it wet. Then there's an idea called evaporative cooling. So if you know the wind direction, you were talking about the wind direction that time, but wind direction plays a very crucial role. If I let the wind pass over the water, so what this will do, this will cool the place automatically. So I will talk about a building. It was done by the previous firm where I worked in. It is called Pearl Academy of Design. It's in Jaipur. So I was working with Morphogenesis back then. So again, because it's Jaipur, the temperature is so high. And the idea was to build a structure which can operate the maximum without the use of the air conditioners. So there they laid the principles of the cooling towers. We laid the principles of the evaporative cooling, like use the water and let the wind pass, and use the effect, the concept of stack effect. The warm wind goes from the up and the cold wind stays. So it's all the matter of arranging your outlets where what you want to retain and what, like for example, the ceiling fan is a very stupid thing. What it does is that it keeps you happy psychologically, but warm air is all on the top. It's not giving you the cold air, because the cold air is all below, it's not up. So it doesn't help you that much. So that's the reason why the table fans or the pedestal fans helps you much more than the ceiling fans. So now again, how can we moderate the direction of wind by using the vegetation? How can we start bringing the change into the use of the material? Talking back to this structure of Pearl Academy of Jaipur, in that a lot of employment was also created for the local craftsmen. So a method which was adopted there was use of a lot of filler slabs. Filler slab, these are the slabs which I'm talking about, the roof slabs. So roof slabs, how many of you have seen the concreting of the slabs? Anyone else? Concreting of a slab, how the concreting happens or how the roof slab is made? So basically how it happens is that we lay the steel members, you make the rectangles, right? These are laid, and then you pour concrete over it. So that is a reinforcement, and you pour the concrete, so it becomes a reinforced concrete. Now, in a filler slab technology, what we do, we use either the pot or the cover of the pot in those spaces, in all those places. And it is in the shape of an arch, right? Now, this is where the rods are laid, and I am placing such pots over there. Now, when I place concrete on the top, so only certain part will be concreted, and whatever in the bottom will not be concreted, right? Now, if you get into the structural design of it, the structural strength comes from the top portion. You don't need so much of concrete. It happens because there was no other method to really reduce it. So what it does is that first it reduces the use of concrete by around 40%, it reduces it there. At the same time, because it's an earthy material, it reduces the temperature by range of around 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. So that's massive in a place like Jaipur. And we can start adopting these methodology in our houses, what we build, right? So first what it does, it reduces the use of concrete. It gives a lot of opportunities to the local pot makers. Like now people are not using ghada and matki and those earthy material to make the water cool. So it can be even be the source of employment for them. You can generate certainly a massive amount of employment if almost all the houses, says in certain region, adopt to this idea that, hey, in this society we will build all the villas using the filler slabs. Imagine then how many pots will be manufactured that way. So at the same time, what you are doing, you are increasing the employment for the local tradition of creating the utensils. At the same time, you are trying to help yourself by reducing the temperature. Maybe that you may not need the active cooling, that is the use of the machine air conditioner. You will be air conditioning the space just by the use of these passive methods, bringing in back the courtyards. So in Bangalore, I got to design a project in which we brought back the whole concept of the courtyard. Certainly, it was not that big because this is the villas in the complete development, being sold by the builder. But we brought in the courtyard that really helped not only to moderate the temperature, but also it brought people close to the nature, because courtyard gives you an opportunity to plant at least 2 trees from the earth instead of bringing some pots on the balconies. So it makes you flow with the nature. Nature is with you, and your connect starts rebuilding them. Now, these are certain methods which can bring small changes. Now, as far as the larger changes are concerned, it will start happening only and only if we start adopting to the methods of reducing our uses, because the alternative methods are very temporary. Like for example, until unless you don't reduce the use of energy consumption, like how many of you believe that printing the email is dangerous? How many of you believe that if you print the email it's dangerous because all the emails reads, don't print? Okay. Okay. What about else? Yeah? That's the whole point. See, I'll tell you, when you printed an email, I am a person who believes in hardbound. When I don't read Kindles, I will need a book. So the point is that what happens that when you are referring to an email, by each and every click, the certain amount of energy which is being consumed in a larger picture. This is always there. The moment you have printed it and you have kept it, you need not go to it. You printed it, it's always there with you. And it always helps in because and also an idea that a lot of lectures are being delivered through the, like for example, you see a lot of lectures on YouTube. And it said that because it's all available online, you have saved a lot of energy. But it's not the case, because on YouTube, there's a whole big hard drive or hard disk somewhere storing so much of data, running 24 into 7 into see how much. Each and every click of you on the computer is harming a lot to the energy crisis. It is doing so. So we need to get smarter and we need to start reducing our consumption, because anything which is available so easily electronically is gonna be abused. It will be abused that way that you will just keep on using it. Like for example, even the attitude by which we design has changed a lot. There was a period when the designs were made through the hand drafting. So people were very cautious, very careful. They were so touchy about their design. But in a matter of one controls that I can just redo what was done, and it all just has just become so much mechanical. And it has made the things more disastrous. It is leading us to some disasters in some way. It's the whole story of Bhasmasur. I believe all of you must be knowing that, if you get a boon, it can just become like a bane any day. So we have to use it very wisely. So yeah, so these are certain points which I have put across to you. What do you feel about Indian architecture now? That where we are heading, and I did try to connect it with the nature system. I did try to connect with what our original practice was to respect the wreath, why the diversity exists, and which is kind of becoming uniform now. I must mention it. Like if you see a IT building in Bombay, it will be the same perhaps what you will see in Guwahati too. It will not be different, though it is ought to be different. So what do you hope about it, about the whole thing right now? Yeah, 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 yeah. Caves of Ajanta. In Caves of Ajanta, actually. Yeah. So that one was one of the most instinctive point in my life, as I mentioned. And what it did, it really taught me that the people of back then, that the phases of around 2000 years back, were using the technology as good as trying to reflect the light in and generate the light. If I tell you that there is no electricity for you and the walls are, so perhaps you will just no electricity, no electricity. Perhaps we will just live this life for another 1 month. Maybe that we will not even come with a solution. But those guys, because the purpose was to do those paintings, they wanted to translate the ideas that were so crucial and important to them, the transfer of the ideas or transfer of the knowledge, that they choose to go go for an alternative, or rather look into how nature can help us to generate the light. Yeah. So that was very, that was actually very, I can't express what that moment was when I heard about it, because for me those guys were the superstitious and whatnot. I was a Marxist at the end of the day. So yeah. So yeah. Filler slabs. Yeah. Yeah. See, all the plants help you to create the cool environment. They do. But the larger point is that whether we will be able to plant that much plant or not. Certainly, as per the local geographies, certain kind of plants are always recommended. When you will speak to a landscape architect, they will suggest you a complete list of the trees which really go by very well into that local context, because every soil respond to different, every tree respond to different kind of soil. Yeah. So yes, there are plants which does it, and we should certainly do more of plantation. We should look into the materials, and once upon a time it was said that it's said by Frank Lloyd Wright that architecture is the frozen music, and architecture is the frozen music. Can you guess why he said so? And it goes very well with the Indian tradition. Actually, it's frozen music. No, no, he's just said architecture is frozen music. Why is it so? Why do you think he said architecture is frozen music? Because architecture has everything what music needs. And in fact, architecture, like any other art form, has everything what they all need. It has got principles of design, right? It needs harmony. It needs balance. It needs symmetry. Like, if I give you one example, all of you must have come across this thing, the puja kalashya lota, what we use. It's an amazing design. If you ask me, it's a great product design. If you throw it off on somewhere, it will just not roll away. It will just stop there, right? You can place it in different shape, different positions, without it being unstable, right? It has got multiple uses, and it is the way it, you can hold it in different ways. So again, this the lota or the kalash were designed back then. It was a great example of a product design. Now it has got balance, because whenever you throw, maybe you throw any utensil of a day, you throw it and it will just keep on toppling and toppling. It will not get to the stable position again. But that lota, that kalash is so stable, it will just not go beyond. It has got stability, it has got balance. Of course, symmetry is there. But again, there's a different opinions about symmetry, because I said that when you lack in information, you use symmetry. Like, you created something on a half that you don't feel like, chalo, is taraf kuch nahi karte hain. We'll just copy paste this thing in the mirror and you're done. So this is also saying that where you lack in information, you use symmetry. But despite that, yes, symmetry is a character which pleases your eyes, because everything to us is symmetric. So anything what gets into the pattern becomes very naturally very attractive to us. And that is the reason why everyone asks about if you are a design student, everyone will ask by you that what is the pattern of this design, what what is the flow of this design. It's all about the patterns at the end of the day. And all these patterns are nothing but certain mathematical sequences, certain mathematical series which really come out and give you what we have, right? So yeah, so that's the thing. Anything else? Sir, when we talk about Indian architecture, it is more than physical objects. It has concepts of energies in it. Yeah. It has concepts of, as you told only, that it should not be higher than some height. But sir, when we talk about the cultural Marxism, they view everything from the lens of economics. I am a lawyer, so we have that subject. So sir, how do you feel different now as compared to them? And what will be your messages to your older self? See, I will just first define cultural Marxism over here. See, Marxism, Marx also picked up an idea from somewhere. This idea was about that whoever is powerful will oppress whoever is the weaker. It's a rule of the nature. That's the reason why in fact the initial law justified the British imperialism over India too. And you will find even in the writing of Marx later on. So he says that this uses the term savages, Indians and the Asian needs to be taught made civilized, and that was his idea. So later on, when cultural Marxism picked up, and his Marx chose to deliberately place it in the terms of economics. It was not in terms of economics earlier, the first theory. Marx made it with economics. When Gramsci came in, the leader of Italy Communist Party, in the 1930 or 31, perhaps, and he was in jail for a long period when he wrote his whole treatise about the cultural Marxism. He came up with this idea that as a culture, the powerful people make the culture, powerful people, and the history is told by their lens. Then they tell you that this is how the thing is, and history is because Marxism is all about defining the history in certain way, and he chose to define that culture is nothing. The whole thing was divided in structure and superstructure, and the culture is defined by the powerful people, and that's so. And from very beginning, there was one idea that there has to be thesis and antithesis, and then they will have synthesis. So, thesis is the existing system. Then you bring in antithesis, both collide, you get synthesis. Synthesis is what is desired, not even antithesis. This is very interesting. Now, when further beyond the culture, so cultural Marxism was all about demolishing the existing cultural values. That's how, and when you further goes into postmodernism, and then translating further till the Wokism, what exists, it's very different field. I don't want to talk about it right now because otherwise I will completely digress from the subject. So, but their viewpoint of architecture was very much unilateral in nature. It was perceived as something like, if you look at the buildings of Russia, right, they have forms because concrete was being experimented to give a lot of forms, right? So it was such a beautiful material. It is a beautiful material, if you ask me. Concrete is a good material, but their main purpose was to show the power, show house more and more people, build fast. Construction should happen very fast. So, but when you come back to the Indian ways to look at it, see, India में सब कुछ बहुत slow है. It's very slow, and the slowness is a very integral part of our life. There was a period when, if you read the writings of the Greeks initially, when they talk about the Indian villages, then you read the works of other travelers, even if Marco Polo or anyone else, Manushi, and there were so many travelers who came to India, and you read their text. They talk about a very different kind of case in India, And like for example, in Indica, Aryan talks about he was so surprised that there is no slavery in India. He was surprised that when Fen Han came to India, he was a Chinese traveler, he saw that actually the doors are not locked here. So India was a very different place, and there was an amazing slowness in the life because there was a belief that we are living in a cycle, right? In Bhagavad Gita, it is like Krishna says to Arjun that I was here, you were also here, and you will. There is nothing called death and life that way. It's just a part of death and life are just like small reaction. You are gonna exist all the time over here. Your existence will always be there. So we are never gonna die. So why to rush for the things? So we were not even rushing to acquire a lot of things. So our whole the quest was about toward the moksha. So even the buildings what we built, the mandirs which were created, the mandirs or the temples, they were also very much inspired by this whole cosmological ideas or the energies. And we all, like for example, just digressing a bit, when we say that WC, water closet, what is in the bathroom or toilets, needs to face north, west, north, south, north, east, west, is because of direction, and it works very well for the yogic thing. So that's the reason why in the Vastu it has become irrelevant right now. I will put this also because we are not getting into the yogic ideas right now. We are not practicing it, so it is of no significance to you the way it's put. So yeah, so it really plays a very crucial role in your life. The energies are there. The concept of looking at how the cycle of life works, this is there, and that is what makes your life slow. And that is the reason why when we never had this concept of mopping. So when in the floor you always use the broom, because even an insect should not be killed. That's okay, it will be slow, but the priority was not to save the time, but to save the life of that ant who might just get killed if we mop it. So that's really make the whole Indian way to look at whole system, including architecture, much more different than the rest of the world, because you are convinced that you are not gonna die. You will come back, or rather than come back, you are here. It's not a linear time. It's a quasi-cyclic time. It's not cyclic, it's quasi-cyclic actually. So for quasi-cyclic, you can refer to the work of Dr. C.K. Raju, where he explains that what is quasi-cyclic time, right? So yeah, that's a way. So Marxism is just no way close philosophically to where the Indian ideas or the philosophy existed. Even Plato took a lot of ideas. If you read his Republic, you will find a lot of ideas being from a Vedanta. And there's a Greek philosopher who have said that Plato had traveled to India to gain the ideas. So yeah. Yeah, please. Yeah, please. Yeah. So taking the first question that yes, whether we build the mammoth structure because the kings always feared the death and they maybe, they wanted to be remembered for something. Yes, we built the large structures. Kailasha temple was one of them, and a lot of tall structures in Vijayanagar Empire itself. But one concept was very integral in whole of the thing. It was this, that habitable spaces where you habitate, it will not just go beyond certain height. So yes, we went beyond the excesses because there are anomalies. Whatever the theories and the philosophies may say, kings were the kings and they did digress from the path, or maybe may not be the path. Their way to look at the things were much more different at certain times. They did it, but still we didn't reach to the excesses what the Greeks were doing or what the Romans were doing. We were still very much limited. And having said that, not that we didn't have resource, we had abundant of resource. So if we would have wanted, we could have certainly done it, but we choose not to do it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. 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 Agama Shastras are involved. Ash- Uh, no, so it was certainly driven by the Agama Shastras to start with. That was starting factor, and all the sutras which existed, the mathematical sutras, they were basically very much involved in coming to the proportion ratios. When I say proportion ratios, as in how much height need to go, and because it all depends the width of the base. And yes, the rules were set ki, if you have got this much width of the base, and it was defined as mandala. It is all squarish in nature, and from the square, 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 that's how you go ahead with it. But the point he was trying to make, and what I also got from, is that there may have been a certain anomalies. There may have been, because we just can't say, because it's not written anywhere. Though yes, our shastras very much defined that how a building or this sacred places needs to be built. It's completely defined, a very different sector of architecture altogether, and it deals with a lot of technologies. It is not just about here say that this is just said, and there's a lot of logic behind it, a lot of scientific temperament, that why this needs to be the way it is. Like we use a lot of allegories and we use a lot of metaphors to express a lot of things. Like for example, sun riding on 7 horses. It's not the 7 horses, but the 7 colors. So like that, there are many anomalies. There are a lot of metaphors which have been used. Yeah, and the 2 more questions were there. One was that post-independence. Yes, certainly we have. I don't see any structure personally, being an architect, that which can be proud of. Someone can be proud of that something like that was built. But having said that, I will also look into the factors and the situation and the considerations which came in, because the circumstances under which we got independence, in fact we were dominion, it's again, I don't want to get into that right now, but when that happened, the circumstances were so bad, our economy was so badly ruined, we were so much high with Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier is the man who designed Chandigarh, right? So Chandigarh is everything but Indian architecture. And Chandigarh is everything, not everything but Le Corbusier, because it represents more of Le Corbusier. Now many people, when you go to Chandigarh, you will feel very happy that you are able to drive very efficiently, the sectors don't get crowded and everything. But when you go back to the base of the story, that how Chandigarh came into being, one, I will not talk about the Nehruvian legacy here, I will only talk about Le Corbusier, I will limit it to architecture. So Le Corbusier was very much fascinated with the automobiles. And because his fascination of automobiles drove him to this opinion that the road needs to be so linear that people can keep on driving very flawlessly. This was his whole thesis. And that's why he also came up with the idea that roads need to go in the grid iron pattern, Now, before that, it was Albert Mayer who was supposed to design Chandigarh city. And his plan of Chandigarh city was certainly not very Indian, but it was inclined towards the Indian nature, where I will not use the word chaos or something, but it was very organic to some extent. And if you talk to a transport planner also, he will also say that at times, not very linear roads within the city helps you because it controls the speed as well. So there's a lot of rationale also which can be put behind the organic form of design and the gridiron pattern of the roads. And so we were so much high with the Le Corbusier idea that this idea of those box windows came across everywhere. You go to the city and you will find some old banks building designed that way. So our whole architecture had got completely controlled by the modernist ideas, and later on with the postmodernist ideas. And once the whole school of thought have emerged on that line, it becomes very tough to get back to whether, like even for that matter, the religious places what were designed, they are not able to cater to the very cosmological feel which they would have catered in the past, and maybe that century down the line, they will not be exactly the reflectance of what 1,000-year-old Kailasha temple is to us. That is for sure. Yeah, yeah, Vastu research, there have been a lot of research actually. There have been. So there have been a lot of PhD thesis also around it, which I have come across personally. But I think that there has to be a common place where architects, engineers, and the experts of the Vastu need to come together, and because you will find a very curious case in Vastu. Vastu has also become more like a business. So, for example, I know a bit of Vastu, and I would come across a certain person would be there who is a Vastu expert who will just utter something, but he's a Vastu expert consultant, so I will just need to listen to him because I'm an architect and I'm not a Vastu expert. So now this needs to be rationalized. We have to pick the things from Vastu. Like for example, if you ask about Vastu, then none of the apartments are compliant because you have got the toilets inside the apartment. So that way apartment is just no. But we have to live with it. So now when we have worked this way, so that's how our civilization have worked along, the evolution. It's not reformation, reformation happens to the deformed. But evolution is a natural process. A seed germination, then seed, and then the plant. That's the evolution. So evolution needs to be there for the Vastu, but it will happen with the consultation with the architects and the engineers, and we need to come to a common place that what is good for the geography which you are building in.
That's all.